This segment is brought to you in part by the Canadian Historical Arms Society, owners of the Genesee Range, the premier recreational sport and training facility in Western Canada. See us online at historical-arms.com.
The Quiet Professional, a podcast about law enforcement, security, justice, and politics. We are digging deeper on the issues and going where the information takes us with access to experts and authorities. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Quiet Professional. Today, we are going to talk about challenging the status quo in addressing mental health and also how we engage with those involved in mental warfare. For this, I've got a returning guest. Dr. Shauna Springer is here, and it's been a little while, but if you haven't seen her work or heard the last podcast, give you a little background. She is a Harvard graduate who has become a trusted doc to U.S. military warfighters. And I think after this, you'll see why I say we can probably add her to the list of first responders as well. She is a best-selling author and one of the world's leading experts on psychological trauma, military transition, suicide prevention, and close relationships. And she has a new book, which is either on pre-order or available now, depending when you're listening to this. It's going to be titled Fallout. So 10 common beliefs that kill our bravest and the truths that can save them. So welcome, Shauna.
Thank you, Nathan. It's good to be here again.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. And thank you for sending a copy of the book ahead of time. So I went through it. I made a ton of notes.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you.
I felt like I was back studying in class, but it was really good. And I think you're challenging some stuff that really does need to be called out and needs to be said. So I appreciate the work.
Thank you. Yeah, it's thanks for taking the time to read it. You're a very busy person. And the show title is interesting, The Quiet Professional, because that's actually my most comfortable, natural mode. But when I reached out to you and said, Nathan, I'm bringing forward a book. Can you squeeze me into your podcast? I really appreciate you making this happen for me. So here we are, and happy to talk about wherever you want to take the conversation.
Yeah. You know what? Maybe right off the top, and I was saying this just before we started recording, I come at this topic, just mental health in general, with a lot of ignorance. I ask a lot of questions out of that, but I'm trying to learn. And for me, I think a lot of this is maybe my whole life has just been seeing is believing.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we talk about these things, it's like, how do you contextualize it for the average person, for them to understand what truly is going on? So we'll get all into that, but maybe we'll start with the book, like talking about Fallout and just what brought you to writing about this now? Was it a specific event or just kind of a culmination of things? So tell us, about the book, why now, and what exactly you're getting at with it.
Thank you. Yeah, off the top of my head, I would just say it's kind of the cumulative trauma that comes from being a doc to so many protectors and defenders and seeing the heartbreak happen again and again and feeling the heartbreak. This is not an abstract clinical thing for me. I'm impacted by the losses of people in these communities very personally. And I got to a point where I said, I've had enough of that. And I've tried, and I've been very polite, I think, in saying, we could be doing different. We could be doing better. And hopefully I'm polite, in this book as well. But I'm very clear and convicted that we need to really re-examine our entire approach to warrior wellness, to how we support first responders, to understanding mental warfare. I don't even really talk about it in terms of suicide prevention. Like, I'm at that level of, let's talk about mental warfare, because it's part of the path. If you're going to be a protector and defender, it's just part of the deal. And so we haven't prepared people at all on the mental warfare side. And that's missing half of really what needs to be trained and prepared before they encounter it.
maybe I'll even backtrack a bit and just
Mhm.
in my own experience, the only thing I really do understand about the mental side of things and preparation is from martial arts.
Okay.
So, that's kind of where it would have started for me. And
Okay.
a lot of that is like you see just how much you can push yourself when you
Mm.
believe in something. Like the mind
Mhm.
can really bring the body along,
Yep.
especially when you're in a sparring match or a fight. Like if
Yep.
you're telling yourself you're out of the fight, you're done
Yeah.
even before it started. But, there's people who get shot dozens of times and just keep going forward. And it's like, you're if you've got the mental state, you can keep moving. So that's just like a bit of a frame of reference for me where I'm coming from. But I
Yeah.
imagine you come across that quite a bit.
Well, I also did martial arts for a while, in some different kind of styles, not like for so many years that I'm proficient in any one style, but enough to be, sort of to use those analogies with some personal understanding.
Yeah.
And I think martial arts, and the whole tradition of Bushido in Japan, really is a long and ancient story of understanding the mind and the body and the connection between those two. I know that, in Marine Corps training, Richard Strozzi Heckler was, a meditation and mindfulness guy who trained Marines. And so,
Mm.
to your point, the mind state you're in can unlock the body or block the body or send you down a channel of defeat or whatever. And at the same time, I think we're all resilient until we're not. And so, if we look at those people that come back and come back, it doesn't mean they're not impacted at a human level and that they don't need support and healing for those human impacts, no matter how strong and brave they are.
Yeah. One thing you brought up, and I don't think I've had anybody mention this on here, so maybe we'll flip it around on the
Sure.
doctor and we'll say,
Yeah.
you brought up how the impact of all the people that you talk to,
Yeah.
the impact it has on you as a clinician or someone that's, helping all these people through whatever
Yeah.
issues they might have. What is that like? And then how do you deal with those type of things? Because you must listen to
Mm.
some horrific stories
Mm.
on one side, but then even the other side is like what the book gets at. We, might go see somebody and they're like, hey, here's these steps and follow this program or take these meds. And
Yeah.
you're just freaking out, going like, no, that's the wrong thing. So you kind of get like a different impact from different angles.
That's a really interesting question. And I've never had that question. Um, so it's fine. It's great. Let's go with it. So I think the horrific stories are not a problem for me. This is me speaking personally. That's not the impact I'm talking about. It reminds me of people that don't understand the warrior spirit, who say that it's a trauma to serve in a war zone. And then the warriors are saying, no, I was at the center of my purpose in the war zone.
Yeah.
That's not my trauma. It might have been traumatic for you. So you think it was traumatic for me, but it's not a trauma. So, as a healer with a kind of warrior spirit, the stories aren't the problem. They don't keep me up at night. It's just, I walk through the trenches of mental warfare with protectors and defenders. It comes with the territory. It's my purpose. That's not the impact I'm talking about. The impact is the helplessness. Helplessness is the most intolerable emotion for people with a warrior spirit of different kinds. And to your point, there's this piece of art called The Scream. I'm probably going to pronounce the artist wrong. You probably know maybe better than I do, but Munch is I think the name of the artist. So it's this kind of cartoon. You'd recognize it if you saw it. It's this
Okay.
guy kind of standing with like his hands on his face and like a look of just no, like
Yeah.
helplessness. And that is how I feel about seeing all of the things that I know are not going to hit the mark, just repeatedly get supported, funded, you know, seen as best practice when it's such a split for me because I work with so many people who are just telling me in every clear way, that's not what we need. That doesn't do it for us. That training would never work in my unit, with my team, with my, fellow veterans, police officers, firefighters. It would never work. So there's this split that I'm trying to resolve with this book by saying,
Okay.
here's what I've heard from warriors and first responders, hoping that people can hear it in that light and really fall out with me, break from the beliefs that are not working, because only when we break from those can we start to really heal.
Why do you think that let's take the US Army just as an example, because they're
Sure.
like such a big organization with a huge budget. If you have people in there that are not getting the proper care, for example, they spend a lot of money on this stuff. So, what are they? Is it just a checkbox exercise for like someone or an organization like that at this point? Like, why are they not? Why would an organization not be able to find the proper path to send people on?
Yeah. It's a bit of a head scratcher at some level, but at another level, I think there are these circles of comfort for organizations. And
Hmm.
sometimes bringing in outsiders, there's this invisible wall you hit. It's not for lack of trying. And actually, I would say I've done a lot of really good work with certain special forces units and progressive leaders. And so I've actually seen, to be fair, how what right looks like from some of these
Yeah.
progressive leaders and these armies. And I would actually say that overall, although often true that sometimes people are not getting what they need in um, the military as a whole is ahead of where public safety is, in my observation. So, one of the reasons why
Mm.
I am migrating my advising, consulting, training, all of that to public safety is I feel like that's even more true. Is that public safety is at this like evolutionary like inflection point where they maybe start to think that wellness is a good idea. And what we're seeing is check the box wellness programs that don't work, that nobody uses, that nobody trusts. And I'm trying to stand up something that is safe and confidential, that will really respect the people that need the help and get them back on the line, where it's not like you're permanently sidelined because you have
Yeah.
what is to me a very predictable challenge from taking this path.
Well, one of the things you also bring up in the book is you talk about all the suicide awareness campaigns
Yeah.
and how damaging that can be. And I've had a
Yeah.
slightly different opinion on them, not
Okay.
opposite of yours, but I see a lot of these as um, they just give people in general just something to do, and
Yeah.
they feel like they can be a part of something. I don't know if they just can't find something to do themselves, but it's like, okay, I threw the shirt on, I showed up, I said like a few nice things, and then I'm going to go on with my business. And it's like, but you didn't do
Do
anything, you
anything.
didn't make a change.
Yeah.
And then you actually had a quote in the book.
Yeah.
I'm going to read it here. So it was from somebody that you were working with. And they said suicide awareness campaigns are for the people watching, not those who are in the game. And I
Yeah.
thought that was like spot on. So,
That was a first responder that said that.
yeah,
That was somebody who's a first responder. Um, and I agree that he was completely hit the nail on the head with that one. A lot of the campaigns end up being kind of virtue signaling, look at me kind of things. And there's nothing worse. Well, I don't want to be extremist. It isn't helpful for people to have the mirage of hope without the action that they need, without the insights, without the actual ways to
yeah,
heal, right? And so when you have
yeah,
a lot of funds, think about the tremendous energy and manpower and funding that goes into all of it. And it not only doesn't help, it actually can increase risk for a lot of the people that are suffering, making their
mm,
grief harder to bear, making them feel like this is a runaway train that can't be stopped, making them feel like they're being looked at as though they're in a fishbowl by outsiders who don't know and feel their pain. So that quote is, it's more for the people outside, maybe who are raising funds or wanting to like touch the elephant a little bit without knowing what it feels like to walk the trenches of
yeah.
mental warfare.
Well, and you talk about the numbers, right? It's like if a campaign says there's 10,000 suicides a day, well, that could really make a person who's in that state feel like, wow, there's really no hope. Like, look how
Yes.
many are going down a day. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's an impact beyond just the words. And I really like what you were saying about the action. So, like the follow through. I think that's what's always missing. Like, lots of
Yeah.
people do the virtue signal, say the nice things. The organization says, yeah, I provided this. We're all good.
Yeah.
And then they just leave the person.
Yeah.
And that's so bad.
That's so bad. It's the semblance of hope, the mirage in the desert, without the actual thing that people need to heal and come through that. So to me, it's not just about misuse of funds, a misdirection of people's energy, but harnessing all of that for things that are counterproductive versus here are the insights that people need to navigate the mental warfare that's part of the path. You know, here's the new understanding. I've been thinking about this new analogy and it's a little bit weird. So I don't know if I still have to kind of work with this, but we've been thinking about looking for that needle in the haystack, you know, that one person who's suffering, kind of like the signs of risk. To me,
Mhm.
that's the wrong method, approach, way of looking at it. I think it's actually more like you've got lots and lots of frogs in the water, and they're all sort of like boiling at some temperature. And you have to be discerning about which frogs are boiling a little bit too much. And they need to be taken out of the water, given some treatments and some healing and some time with a trusted doc, and then brought back on the line. So I'm kind of recently, just in the last few days, playing with that analogy of it's really that mental warfare is common and widespread and a matter of when, not if. And suicide is not something that has to happen. Having dark and self destructive thoughts doesn't mean that you have to end up dying by your own hand. For many people, suicide is actually a critical identity moment and an inflection point where they
Mm.
realize how strong they are, they realize what their sacred values are, they define their tribe, which then helps them in the challenges for the rest of their life. They know who they can count on and what their go to strategies are. So a crisis can just as many times with the right support and insights be an inflection point for an explosion of positive growth. So I just look at it very differently, I think, than maybe
Yeah.
other people do.
Okay. I actually want to go back to
Hmm.
this boiling frog thing. So maybe we'll work on this a bit
You don't
together.
think that's weird? Can
Uh,
you help me with like something a little bit less morbid?
no, I think I understand it
Hmm.
slightly different maybe. I think a lot of people just look for stuff that has like a very black and white answer,
Hmm.
right? Like they just want I just need the definitive
Hmm.
you know, tell me, okay, I see A, B, and C, then I'm gonna do D,
Yeah.
and we know how to solve it. Whereas it's complicated,
Mhm.
right? You and in the policing world, as we like to say, it depends. Because someone
Yeah.
asks you a question, you're always like, it depends, right?
Yeah.
So everybody's
Yeah.
kind of at a different stage. They all have their different rates they're boiling at. And
Yeah.
you just have to recognize, like, okay, well, this individual, maybe they could sustain it for longer. And whatever signs we might use to kind of like intervene or speak up at a certain point, we recognize that in that individual. And that, I guess, comes down to like the tribe you're mentioning, like family, friends, the peers,
Yep.
the people who know you best. But yeah, I think people, and as I was saying earlier, like for me, seeing is believing. So it is sometimes hard to understand, that stuff that's just kind of floating out there in,
Yeah.
in your mind.
Yeah.
So
Well, here's why actually boiling frogs is not a great analogy now that I think about it that way. Thank you for that. Water boils at a consistent rate unless you change the level of heat. That's actually not
okay.
even accurate. There's a principle that I haven't really put into words, but I'm just thinking this through. There's almost like Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty applied to human nature, where everything is changing all the time. Like you can never tell the precise location, right, of something because it's in constant change.
Yeah.
People are in constant flux too. And if you're talking about seeing is believing, here's a really concrete example that may help lock this in. For 3 years of my career, I worked with people who had survived the suicide loss of their military loved one. people in deep grief who got that call and their life split into two pieces. And some of them became very much at risk in the face of this traumatic grief that was totally overwhelming and all consuming in the first initial impact of that grief. Now, we helped them heal. So even from that kind of trauma, there's healing. So let me be clear about that. But people with no mental health disorders, no history of treatment, no pre-existing challenges, I saw them become suddenly very much at risk of taking their own lives because of the hollowing out and the shock and trauma of that kind of grief process. So things can change very quickly in life, and things can reach a critical, perfect storm of stress. And you can be not suicidal and be honest about that. And then a week later, in a very dark place, based on one call that you have to take, one child death that you saw that really took you to a very deep place, a perfect storm of stress in your personal life that kind of all comes together. So there isn't like a boiling frogs thing, like in a linear way. Everybody's got these different rates and factors, and you really have to be discerning about what are the better cues as to how your people are doing. Does that?
The way you describe that, I could almost apply that to how I try to describe organized crime to people now.
Okay.
Because it's just,
Tell me, I'm interested.
they want like a nice tree and it's just a hierarchy and this person's at the
Mm,
top and then these things happen. It's like, well, if this guy does this, then we know this fallout's going to happen. Like, no, I was just talking with someone earlier today actually about this. I said, you got to look at crime now as like a constellation of factors and everything's moving.
yeah.
And
Yes.
everybody has like, at this time, this person serves a purpose over here.
Yeah.
But they can also serve this purpose to a different group in this different way over here.
Yeah.
And they have all these roles they're playing at different
Yep.
levels. But that speaks to the complexity that you're mentioning
Yes.
with an individual. And at any given second, I say this at this point in time,
hmm
but a second later, well, they could have had a falling out. Their whole organization changes, and all this other stuff changes
Right.
with that.
Right.
I, I think
Yes.
it's people just need to, as we get smarter about these things and look into them more,
Yeah.
we need to have the ability to think outside the box. I feel like that's
Yes.
even too
Yeah.
small to say. It's like we just have to have some major growth in our understanding to be
Yeah.
able to look at things as like a very big picture.
hmm
Oh,
A big and constantly changing picture. So it's not that it's not predictable. You just have to look at different things. For example, if you know that somebody is like fighting for custody of their kid and they stop fighting for custody of a kid, they love that kid, they want that custody, that's a cue that we ought to pay attention to. It wouldn't be assessed in standard suicide prevention approaches. But when somebody with a warrior spirit stops fighting for custody of their kids, we really should pay attention to that. So there are these signs that we can look for, but they're not the signs that are trained with what are basically civilian approaches that don't account for the fact that warriors are professionally good at compartmentalizing their hidden pain. So we can have some predictability and control, but we also have to really know our people and really have different models and different ability to discern and trusted docs that they can turn to before it becomes a
mhm.
crisis, because it can build very quickly and people can honestly say, no, I'm not at risk, and then be at risk. So yes, agree.
Yeah. Can you, and just for listeners, can you explain what you mean when you say the warrior spirit?
Sure. Okay, so I don't mean people that go and serve in combat.
Hmm.
I'm glad you asked because it's not that limited definition of warriors. I mean people who do things others can't or won't do in the service of values they hold sacred. So to me, it was such a natural evolution to take many of the things I've worked on with warriors into my work with first responders. It's a different community. There are many differences in those two cultures. And one of the overarching similarities is this warrior spirit. People who have a code, they yearn to be tested. Their job is not a job. It's a calling and it's a matter of their identity. So when we're thinking about constructing the right systems for them, it's not a matter of they don't have enough courage to get help. It's a matter of we didn't create a structure or system that's safe enough to allow them to get help. You have to really think
Okay.
about it very differently.
I'm wondering too, is this something that like you always just have to talk to people about to learn about, or uh can you see physical changes in someone's brain? Like if you hook them up to some machine, is it possible to see,
Yeah.
could we diagnose it through that? Is that possible?
There's not like one gene or one, indicator, of course. And I don't think you're saying that
Mm.
there is, but as we continue to advance with neuroscience, we can see on a brain scan if somebody is impacted by post traumatic stress injury.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it changes like your nerves firing or things are going a different way.
Yeah, in the amygdala, there's, more activity in the amygdala when just as with obsessive compulsive disorder, there's more activity in the caudate nuclei in the brain. So if you have the right brain scan, you can see this. Now, it's not practical to like put everybody through an fMRI, functional magnetic
Yeah.
resonance, because it's very expensive and time consuming. But there's a study going on at NYU Langone Health right now that'll be published in about a year, maybe less. That's going to show that post traumatic stress causes an injury. It can be seen if you have the right brain scan, and it can be healed with interventional psychiatry plus informed therapy that's culturally aligned, in this case, with first responders or with veterans.
I've always wanted to ask this too. And
Sure. Oh,
yeah, have you ever
intriguing.
had anybody come in and you're like, no, you're totally fine? Or, you're just
Sure.
trying to get, yeah, like people who play the system?
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure.
Okay.
So, when I was at the VA for 8 years at the start of my career, there were
Mm,
plenty of people who, um, represented that they were somebody other than they were. You'd hear somebody with these combat stories and kind of look into it, say, this is not really feeling. And then turns out they were an HVAC guy in a base and never, suffered any military related trauma or deployed to any combat zone, right? Totally out of sync. Or somebody would say they deployed extensively to Costa Rica and they can't speak Spanish, so that doesn't work, right? The story doesn't hang.
yeah.
Now, it's a small percent, but what
Yeah.
I used to do, because I value honesty and I think it goes both directions, is I would throw in a few questions into my assessment to see whether somebody was being straight with me. So when I would assess post traumatic stress symptoms, I would do all the regular symptoms, and then I had my own set of questions. And part of what I was trying to discern is, are you here to heal and grow? Because that's what I'm in the business to help you do. Or are you trying to get me to say you're very disabled and, then this, you should get this money and then you never come back and you'll never avail yourself of services that will help you heal and grow. Or maybe it wasn't even true in the first place in some cases. So
Hmm.
I really wanted nothing to do with discerning like who gets service connection, who doesn't. And I would be very upfront with that. But still, some people were like really after that particular thing from me. And so one of the questions, for example, I would ask is, do you ever feel like you're kind of like you have the taste of like copper in your mouth, almost like you're sucking on a penny when you think of combat or you remember combat? And when people would go, oh, yeah, yeah, I get that all the time. I made that up. So, like,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think in psychology, like, there is a place for us to be discerning and
Hmm.
not just, I mean, to be compassionate, but also to make space for discernment so that we can forge relationships based on respect and honesty. And I wanted to know who was coming in being straight with me as part of how I could build trust with people. Now, this is the minority of patients. I saw
Yeah.
so many hundreds of patients. Most of them were wonderful to work with. And I tried my best to hold the line around truth and honesty as best I could with some
Mm.
of these approaches that would help me discern some of this stuff.
Well, and certainly if people come in and they just kind of bullshit through the process and just want to get a form signed so they can get some benefits, if that gets found out, or even if the rumors start, right? Because they come in and represent themselves as something they're not, and other people know they're not. Um, that just hurts. That hurts everybody who does want to get
That's what I mean
help.
by
And
hold the line. That's what
yeah,
I mean by hold the line, because the guys and gals that really needed that support, there's almost an inverse relationship between how much they pushed for it and how much they actually needed it. Where I would get to know someone and
mm,
I would sometimes say, I think you should apply for service connection. They tended to minimize it. For a lot of my veteran patients, after I got to know them, they're, working hard. I would say, I think you should go see my buddy over in the veteran service office and get some of these benefits lined up, because I think this really is impacting you at some level. Now, this was also before I had any sense that we could really heal these things. At this time, I was very limited in my understanding. And I, at this time, thought this is a disorder, you're going to have to manage it for life. And I don't really think that way anymore. But based on that, some of those people, needed those services and benefits.
that's very interesting. You're talking about like just how you used to view it in one way or believe something, and
Yeah.
now you've kind of evolved into something else. Do
Yep.
you find that does that happen a lot? Like, I feel like people kind of get just
Yeah.
like their one track and they're like, yeah, this is the way I'm going. But I mean, as practitioners, as doctors, you're always reading the newest, latest thing. I mean,
No, most people aren't.
do you just keep evolving as you go along?
No, that's what we should be doing.
Mm.
Francesca Gino is a Harvard researcher who looked at the practice of doctors. There are, I think, heart surgeons and in this study, and most of them just stay tracked. And I think the same is true in psychology. The minute you slap a label on something like gold standard, best practice, that's a
Mm.
problem. We ought to always be evolving. And so, one of the ways I've been really out of step with people in my profession is by really adopting a new model of care that combines things I don't do, biological interventional psychiatry treatments, with trauma informed, culturally respectful therapy. I do a piece of it, but I don't do all of it anymore. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people, to your point, get very entrenched in their way of thinking and in their sense that they're the expert and that they have these empirically supported, all of these labels, gold standard, best practice, empirically supported, they're a double edged sword. Because in a best world, you go, okay, I'm going to try and like read the research and do the latest thing. But the best practice, when it doesn't evolve for like 10, 20 years, that ought to be a head scratcher right there. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm out of step, and it's, something that feels uncomfortable to kind of be often the only person in the room saying, but we need to pull in other providers. We don't own our patients. We want to get them the best outcomes. This is how you do it. We need a new model. It's been a bit of a lonely road, but there are some
Yeah.
other docs I've met. It's so much fun when I meet somebody who's open minded, and like I've met some of those people too along the kind of path here.
Yeah. I think, it can be hard for some of them to, when you're talking about owning your patient. Yeah. I could see that, like how people go like, no, 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 I know what's best for you, and they don't
Yeah.
want to hand you off. But it's like, well, if I'm not the right person, you're coming to me with
Yeah.
whatever your story is. It's like, well, maybe I can help you with this one piece, but here's all these other resources you
Yeah.
should use or talk to. I mean,
Mhm.
that's what you're supposed to do. What's in the best interest of the patient.
Right. It's not about you.
Yeah.
Not about you.
And just talking about evolving,
Yeah.
you mentioned, so you talk about resiliency versus
Yeah.
elasticity,
Yeah.
and just changing minds around this. I thought this was one of the most interesting parts of the book. Can you
Mm.
explain what you mean by, what the
Mhm.
difference between elasticity and resilience is,
Sure.
and how that works?
Yeah. I mean, for years, I've seen this sort of obsession with resiliency, being resilient, and people, often outsiders, coming in, training some of our strongest and most resilient people to be resilient, which I'll never do. It seems so offensive to me to say, I'm going to
Hmm.
teach you how to be more resilient when these people I'm supporting are seeing hundreds of traumas, and they don't need my help in being resilient. Resiliency is bounce back from adversity, right? And there's a number of problems with this, and I really expound on this in the book. But off the top of my head, a few of them are it creates kind of this sense of if you're a resilient person, it can push you away from getting help. Because now you keep going back in your mind saying, well, but I'm a resilient person. You don't see yourself in the frame of someone who needs to like become more elastic, who needs to develop a capacity to have flexibility and range of motion in your nervous system, in your identity, and in your relationships. So a second thing is resiliency is that you have it or you don't. It's more of like a trait versus something you can cultivate. Elasticity fits more with how we take people that are in special forces and develop them to have flexibility, range, agility,
Mm-hmm.
and that's in their identity too. Because otherwise, what I see with first responders is kind of similar to the special forces folks I worked with. They have these like kinetic, chaotic deployments in special forces that mirror the emotional whiplash that a lot of police officers have on a daily basis, inhabiting two worlds at the same time with two very different roles and different relationships and rules, right? So you go into certain environment and there's a role and rules, and then you want to come home and be a loving parent, father, brother, wife, husband. It's emotional whiplash. And so
Mm-hmm.
what is needed is not resilience, just, suck it up and like keep toughing it out. What is needed is actually the cultivation of something very different, which is elasticity. And so I've been working with my colleagues at Magnus One to really define this concept, to operationalize it, and to create a number of actionable things that people can do to cultivate that kind of capacity.
Well, and around it, you mentioned in the book, and I'll mention the title again here. So it's Fallout. You talk about the tribe as like a real source of strength for people, and it got me thinking about, and it helps with the elasticity piece. So it got me thinking about when we talk about symbols, like the blue line, the thin
Okay?
blue line,
Yeah.
and all the critics of police will just say, "Oh, it's just it's either the boys' club or you're creating a bunch of liars in there, and everyone's keeping secrets and doing nefarious things." And it's like, as law enforcement, you're just not allowed to have anything. You're not allowed to have any camaraderie. You can't be
Mhm.
anything. You can't talk to anybody. Uh, so we kind of deal with a lot of criticism,
Yeah.
I guess, in
Yeah.
that aspect. And that there were so many debates around the thin blue line and if you're allowed to like wear it. In the US, I think a lot of chiefs of police stood up for it
Yeah.
more so. But then in
Yeah.
Canada, everyone was just like, don't wear it, don't fly a flag, don't show it anywhere.
Interesting.
And it was like we just trying to find like one group, one thing that can kind of combine us
Yeah.
all, and we can say like, hey, we identify as such, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it immediately got shot down, and I know a lot of people were pretty upset
Mm.
about it.
Mm.
Uh, but that is probably the closest example I could think of to when you're talking about some of this stuff with like the tribe, and I was like, oh, that immediately made me think of like identifying as people wanted to fly the thin blue line flag
Yeah.
or whatever way they show it. So
That's fascinating, Nathan. I'm just thinking out loud here, but it is different, isn't it? Firefighters can show up in public as a group and be, a crew, and everybody loves them, and they wear their uniforms off work because people want to buy them meals and thank them, and
well, a lot of firefighters, they'll put the sticker on their truck.
yeah,
You'll see a sticker
yeah,
on their truck that
yeah,
says like, I'm a firefighter, or it says like their fire hall or something. You
exactly.
don't see that with police.
No, you do not. You do not. And what makes me sad about what you said is I infer that that must be a moral injury, an integrity assault to people who are putting their lives at risk for other people, and people who are sacrificial public servants who are warrior spirit types.
Mhm.
You're right. Warriors can gather as units, they can have pride in service, but the minute that cops do it, they are supposed to have nefarious motives. And it's not right. It's not fair. I know so many good people that are police officers. That's a mischaracterization of who they are.
I can see why. Like, I expect it from defense lawyers. I expect it from all the bad guys out there, right? And they're going to critique it and criticize because they want to demoralize police. They don't want you to be out there working, right? They have a purpose for that. So I understand that. It's like the internal stuff when nobody will stand up for you, but that's
Yeah.
where I was saying, like, we see the difference. Kind of Canada was more just outright, like, everyone was like, nope, we're not wearing this and don't put it on your uniform. Whereas I saw some chiefs of police in the US were actually saying, like, no, I don't have a problem with it. And we're not allowing it to be co-opted by some extremist
Yeah.
group.
Yeah.
Because I think some group was trying to claim it as theirs or something. But it's like, well, I don't know, like, what if they just took the pride flag and everybody started wearing that, and then you're just going to say that's now co-opted? Like, I just felt
Yeah.
like you couldn't find a way to identify as police, as fellow
Mm.
law enforcement without, I don't know, like walking around showing your badge to everybody.
Mm.
So
That's so interesting. Yeah, I think because done right, the thin blue line is about the warrior code of people who choose that calling, who follow that calling of service and sacrifice.
mhm,
Done right, it's about honor and service to the community and integrity, right? And that's what it is for many people. And we would agree that there are a few bad apples, but it kind of, no, it reminds me of other things that I've seen where people are told you can't say this, be this, and in your heart, like that's not accurate. And they're taking power from you. So I think a
yeah,
police chief saying, no, that's okay, and here's what it means to us could be a great way to know that they're leading a tribe, not a group of employees. That this is what this
mhm,
means to us, that there's some sense of we see things other people don't see, and we have hundreds of traumas, and we need to have a sense of connection within our unit, within our group, and we're here to serve the community. We hold those two
yeah.
things in tension.
No, I really appreciate that view on it. One thing I'm going to jump to back to a different thing we were talking about, though, just kind of going back to like how when we're having the conversation about suicide and then some of the darker thoughts that people do have,
Mhm.
and whether you can see it on a brain scan or not. One of the things you talked about in the book is you say that uh, someone's perception isn't necessarily wrong, but it's neurologically it's been distorted. When someone has a traumatic event, does it physically change the chemistry? Like, you all of a sudden don't produce the right hormones anymore, or the same level or balance of them? Like, does it have that type of impact, and then your brain
Yeah.
is now functionally changed?
Yeah. That's why we talk about it as an injury rather than a disorder, because certain things will change, that are associated with increased activity in the amygdala, for example. When you have a post traumatic stress injury, there's an additional secretion of nerve growth factor, often that you'd see. Now, I will never say you can see suicidality in a brain scan. That's not what I'm saying. But if you follow suicidality researchers at Harvard, they've shown that the agitation and things like sleeplessness and sleep disruption are precursors to many suicide attempts. And you can see
Hmm.
biological correlates of allostatic load. Now, here, allostatic load just kind of means wear and tear on the body. Or, in other words, if somebody is kind of locked into fight or flight, that's something we could potentially see on a brain scan and we could treat. And treating that before it becomes, prolonged state where they're really locked in to fight or flight can, I think, help save some lives. So I think
Yeah.
both are true.
I just think I think of, like, maybe sometimes people go, I really don't want to open any doors because then I don't know what'll happen to me. Like, if you go
Sure.
in. So I
Yeah.
feel like you would get scared. Or I don't know if there's a better term for it, but like, you'd actually be scared to go in and learn some of this stuff.
I was just thinking like that happens all the time, especially with guys. Like they don't want to get, prostate exams because they don't want to know that they have maybe elevated PSA levels, and but you still should go and do it, right? So compare that. Like, here's my frame for this. For years in special forces, between combat deployments that remind me of what cops do, right? Coming back and forth between two worlds in very quick succession. They get treated with the stellate ganglion block that resets the adrenaline system, brings them back to calm and control in the body. You don't need a brain scan to do this. I mean, it's just, are you not sleeping? Are you irritable? Do you feel like you're not yourself? Kind of like losing your temper with the people you love? Are you having such hypervigilance you can't enjoy a movie out in public? Are you unable to read a book because you can't concentrate? These are symptoms that in 5 or 10 minutes I could ask someone about, and so many of the people I meet with, police officers, firefighters, EMS, dispatch, all first responders and veterans will say yes, 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 and yes. So if you do this biological treatment to reset the fight or flight system, it dramatically changes the mind state. And so I don't think people are in I think there's an altered state of consciousness that can come when people get out of balance biologically. I don't think their thinking is rational. I think there's an injury we have to address that we've been missing. But if we change the frame to just, let's look at those kind of biological indices of this injury, let's treat the injury, then it stays at the level of let's treat the injury, do a little bit of work, and get you back on the line versus, let's do a whole big psych assessment, find out everything that's wrong with you, and label you for life with this PTSD diagnosis that you're going to make feel as like part of your identity for the rest of your life. That's not the path we need for protectors and defenders.
Yeah. Well, and that makes sense. And in the book, you're also talking about how changing some of the definitions from was PTSD to PTSI, because then you call it more the injury side.
Yeah, and that didn't start with me. I agree with it, but Frank Ochberg, who's the same psychiatrist that's just a legend in psychiatry, who did the Stockholm syndrome research, he was the one that kind of started that movement around PTSI with Dr. Lipov from Stella Mental Health. And so they've really championed that. I agree with it and would support it. But the whole team at Stella Mental Health really looks at this as an injury, not a disorder, because of how we sort of see this play out.
Can you talk a little bit about Stella, the company, and then
Sure.
some of the stuff that you're doing there that might be like not, I don't know if it's call it not mainstream, but it's just like lesser known therapies because you have the ganglion block. If I say that right.
Yeah, the stellate ganglion block. We call it a dual sympathetic reset because people get 2 injections about here and here in the neck, and it reboots the adrenaline system is kind of how people explain it. But essentially, I explain it as it calms the nervous system and brings it back to calm and control. So when you're locked into fight or flight, which happens when you get enough hits to your adrenaline system, you can get kind of locked in there. And we can help restore calm and control to the body with something that takes 15 or 20 minutes. It's been a go-to treatment in special forces for many years, and many people have never heard of it. So it's safe, it's illegal. It doesn't even use anything psychoactive, which is why it's a wonderful treatment for police officers, because it's like getting Novocaine at the dentist. There's nothing that could make you pop positive on a drug test. And it's actually, if you know the research around this, it's actually used as a performance enhancer in special forces because it improves neurocognitive performance and improves reaction time. So that's an example of a treatment, one of a few. I mean, Stella is not just an SGB company, but that people often have never heard of that could be a total game changer if more people in public safety just knew this is safe, it's legal, it's effective for 85% of the people that go through this, and it can just bring back your calm and control.
Like on the bigger podcasts, and you see how these people get special forces on, they talk about, is it ayahuasca?
Yeah, some ayahuasca, ibogaine, 5-MeO.
Ibogaine, yeah.
These are psychedelics, powerful psychedelics, which some of them have potential. Some of them are I've heard too many people say, that really spun me out, or I hear about the bad outcomes when it's done badly. I think
Yeah.
we still have some room to go before we've got the right guardrails and it's safe and all of that. So Stella Mental Health adheres to the principle of responsible innovation. We will do what is safe and legal that is also very innovative. So there's other things like ketamine injections that we also do that for some people. Now, police officers don't want that because they've got that too hooked up in their brain with special K and a street drug. Very different when it's
Yeah.
used for medical, purposes. And people are often surprised to learn that they often have had ketamine. If they've ever had surgery, general surgery,
Hmm.
it's part of the typical cocktail that you get during general anesthesia. You just don't know it because you're so kind of out of it that you just don't know it. But it's a very safe anesthetic that, when given in a medically responsible setting with monitoring and supervision and follow up care and support, is very powerful for facilitating neuroplasticity in the brain. So we have something called the soft protocol where we combine stellate ganglion block with some ketamine. And we've done it for a lot of warriors and firefighters, but police officers are understandably a little more reluctant to do that, even though it could really help many of them.
Yeah. Well, as you kind of transition your practice into kind of a law enforcement focus,
Mhm.
are
Yep.
you able to gain a lot of traction with like police services, chiefs of police? Like
Mhm.
how's that been going so far?
It's interesting, yeah. So I am actually in a transition time. I'm going to always kind of be behind Stella in the sense of I helped to. I was a co-founder and I'm the senior psychological advisor for Stella, but it's not going to be my day-to-day focus anymore. I'm really
Hmm.
going to build thin line advisory going forward to take the work I've done with military leaders and those units and bring it to public safety. Part of it is helping people learn about innovative biological procedures, but my focus is way bigger on helping people understand mental warfare and really equipping peer teams and command staff and giving command staff, honestly, the confidential and safe spaces that they need that are non clinical, where I can do these sidebars with people who otherwise have no one to talk to. And they're carrying so much allostatic load every single day from relentless burdens of leadership. So I have this sort of special niche, and I'm finding it's either very fast or very slow. Um,
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, law enforcement can be,
yeah,
yeah, difficult to work with.
once you're in the sense of
Yeah.
once you've built the trust. Um, the clients that I have that really trust me are saying, just take care of my people. I don't need to know who you spoke to. I don't want to know what you talked to them about. Just bill out the number of hours you spent. If you need more hours, let me know. That's that relationship. So it's like the most trust based relationship. And I can do so much in that structure because it is safe and confidential for their people. On the other hand, there are many people that I've had really exciting conversations with, and oh, we're going to bring you on. And 6 months later, it's oh, we're going to bring you on. And there's
Yeah.
budget, and so sometimes I find the door is triple locked, as one chief told me to expect, because I have to rebuild the trust that I've already earned in the military with a whole different community. And it's slow and it's painful and it's sometimes a little frustrating because I'm like, just read my stuff or just talk to these military leaders or take it from the senior enlisted advisor to chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. I know what I'm talking about. I have something that I can help you with. And it's still very, very slow. So I don't know, Nathan, I have a question for you. Like, how,
Yeah.
what is the best way to speed that up? Let them see how I work, how I think, and really accelerate that trust process so I can do what I do.
You know, I think it's just knowing somebody, especially if you know somebody in the police service itself,
Yeah.
that can speak to that person, because then you already have like kind of that trusted go between.
Yeah. I have those. And
Barring
still,
that, yeah,
it takes a long time. Yeah. And
yeah,
they're not saying no. It's just, I may die before I get an opportunity with some of these departments that want to bring me on.
Yeah, I would have to think on how to speed that up. It's very difficult. I know just from pitching just other ideas, it's like the first thing is always, what's it going to cost me? That's the
Mhm.
first question I've always run into. It doesn't matter what it's about, whether it's equipment, training, I
Sure.
don't know, saving lives. What's it going to cost?
Yep.
So, so it's a hard thing to overcome because they're on very finite budgets, especially with some of the services in the US. Like in Canada, it's a little different, but in the US, like, I mean, you can get some very, very small police services.
Yeah.
What I'm wondering though is like, so you're just one person. Do you have a team of people who think like you and can go out and
A
do this?
very small team. I don't want to get big with this. And I won't
Yeah.
work with everybody. I'm only going to work with the kinds of sheriffs, chiefs, fire, police, and peer teams that are actually progressing, that are wanting to take new insights on board. I am not interested in working with anybody who wants to say, we're working with Doc Springer and, then do more check the box stuff. Like, I'm really interested in people who know they're leading a tribe, people who know they're leading people who are not employees, and people who are
Hmm.
willing to take on board new insights. They don't have to do biological treatments. I'm not here to sell any of that. But I do want to train them very differently about mental warfare and suicide prevention and, really help them understand moral injuries and grief and loss, all these things that really need to be better understood in public safety that are such a source of unaddressed allostatic load. So I'm going to keep, trying to find opportunities. And look, I'm doing fine. I have some wonderful sheriffs that I'm working with. So it's not like a plea for
Hmm.
help, but it is a bit interesting because I have earned the trust in one domain, and that trust takes a while to grow with this new community. And so I've just got to be patient with that and try to keep showing up and, doing what you do to build trust.
Yeah, you think you'd be able to just say, look at all the work I've done in the
Yeah.
military space and the books and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
But then they're still asking for your CV or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think when people read this book, and then one of the biggest takeaways I had from it was a lot of the stuff you were mentioning in there, just about like the cookie cutter kind of programs that can come out, and some of the lines that people have said,
Mhm. Yeah.
or how people, they recall things that they experienced in different training settings. And the whole time I'm just like, yep, I've seen that. I've heard
Yeah.
that. I've been there. Like, and then you're giving like a different view on it, a very different view. So I think people really take a lot of that away from the story, and it's a shorter,
Mhm.
compactor book, and you did this intentionally. You mention it
Yep.
in there, so I mean, it's a quick read and very thoughtful.
Mhm.
So I really appreciated that about it.
Good. That was hard for me, Nathan.
Yeah.
If you knew how much I inhibit myself, like I could use 10,000 words to answer each one of your questions. And at a certain
Yeah.
point, there's something that kicks in that says, okay, be quiet now. Like that's enough. Like give him
Mhm.
back the ball because I have so many things I want to say and, help people understand. And I know that when I'm writing for a very busy, it's not about intelligence. It's not, to be clear. It's about people that are already overwhelmed, that have no time, that are probably locked into high allostatic load. I had to keep it short. So, writing each chapter very short and to the point with 3 takeaways and 3 questions. And
Mhm.
this is actually book 2 in a triad of books that I'm writing. So, if you've read Warrior, that was the first one. That was kind of like,
Okay.
here's what, it takes to connect with warriors. At the time, I was just working with warriors. And then this book is really, here's how we need to think differently about mental wellness and suicide prevention. And then my third book is going to come, but there's another one in my head that's starting to write itself, and I just for the future.
You're too busy. You got like 6 businesses on the go, and you're trying to pitch to all the police services, and you want to write a book.
Well, it's probably true that I'm not pitching them enough. I'm kind of just when they say they're going to hire me, I kind of trust that. And then
Yeah.
6 months later, I'm like, weren't we gonna weren't we going to do
Yeah.
something? Like, put me in the game, you know? So I probably could do a little bit more like whatever prospecting, but I don't like that. The quiet professional, the name of your podcast, that's what I prefer to be. It's just let me
Mhm.
drop in and do the work. But this whole sales part or having to promote a book, I don't love this.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, maybe on that, I want to. One of the last questions I wanted to get to was what type of criticism or backlash or
Yeah.
whatever comes your way from putting this out. What do you expect, and how do you kind of deal with that?
Well, I don't know. We're not very good at predicting what will happen or how we'll feel about it as humans in general. I know that I was expecting a lot more backlash for both of my other books, Warrior and Relentless Courage, than I actually got. In fact, it was surprising, you know, because there were some things that maybe the administrative leadership could have done differently that, you know, could have inflicted less damage, in Relentless Courage. And yet, um, a number of police chiefs really got behind that book. And I connected with a
Good.
number of really wonderful police chiefs, and now that's who I'm supporting, you know, largely with Thin Line Advisory. So I thought this is going to blow my ability to build trust with all the command staff by pointing out kind of, but no, one of the things that they actually request from me most often is 10 things that good leaders do that unintentionally damage their people during critical incidences. And that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't written that book. And then with Warrior, I thought, ooh, the VA is going to not like this because I'm saying running really fast in the wrong direction. And no, they've actually been, nobody's been critical of me that I'm ever aware of. I've always been invited to attend and sometimes even present at the VA DoD conferences. So that didn't happen. So hopefully I'm wrong again. But I am definitely taking on much more boldly in this book. Not any
Hmm.
individual or any particular organization, as you know, you read it, but
Yeah.
ways of thinking that have been well funded and well supported and are probably the backbone of people's business models. And I'm saying that doesn't work for this community. That's not what they need. That is based on a civilian approach and civilian thinking that doesn't hit the target for them. So I'm worried about sometimes, you know, those reactions. You could also look at like who I'm partnered with and who I'm not to know where my values are. I don't do a lot of like galas. I'm not somebody who goes to a lot of star-studded events. I'm not
Yeah.
in that scene very much. That's not where I do my work. And so, you know, I don't know if maybe, you know, calling out the funding that's been spent in various ways around, you know, supporting the tribe. And I don't know. We will see. But hopefully, my hope is people really do care. I think people really do care about protectors and defenders. I think there's good intentions. And maybe we have some of the wrong thinking because nobody has really presented a credible alternative. And maybe enough warriors and first responders, including cops, will say she's right. And she's right because she's talked to us and she's listened to us. And so she's representing the truths we're telling her. And if the tribe gets behind me on this in a resounding and very clear way, then I don't see what anybody can really challenge because it isn't really about me in the first place. It's about me just
Mhm.
kind of communicating what I've learned from protectors and defenders for many years. So I guess we'll see. But the human part of me is like racing for impact. I hope it's positive, but it may be mixed. There's always a few haters, you know?
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I think largely you if you're getting with the last two books, the response you're getting that you're describing there, um, if you're getting that, then you're obviously on the right track. You're saying what people are thinking, and
Yeah.
further to that, you're doing something about it. So, you know, can't say enough. Like I know a few people that swear by your work. I've had you on here twice. I think your stuff is brilliant work, and I hope people pick up the book. Again, it's called Fallout: 10 Common Beliefs That Kill Our Bravest and the Truths That Can Save Them. Um, I want to say thank you for being on the show today. The very last thing, where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, thank you, Nathan, for having me, first of all. I think the best place would be thinlineadvisory.com. And there's a little contact sheet if people want to email me about stuff. You can ask me anything. Ask me about, send you the research on the stellate ganglion block. I wrote a review article with several colleagues of mine. I wrote a 35-page white paper. I'll send whatever people need to know that this is safe and effective. If there are organizations that want to partner with Stella Mental Health, I can form partnerships as a co-founder. So when we work with partners, like the 100 Club of the state of Illinois is one nonprofit that pays for Stella's SGB for any first responder in the state of Illinois. If there are other nonprofits that want to take care of first responders or veterans or any group that's experienced trauma, people can reach out to me and we can form a partnership and really just start healing people. And if people are progressive leaders that want to bring me on and really do more than check the box civilian-based approaches for their police departments, I like working with sheriffs and I like working with firefighters and EMS too. So I would love those opportunities as well if people would like to have those conversations, but all through thinlineadvisory.com.
Great. Well, thank you for being on the show today. And I'll get all those up in the episode description so people can check those out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening in and following along with the discussions. Be sure to click the follow or subscribe button on your respective listening platform. Also, check out the Quiet Professional on X and Instagram under TQP780. And most importantly, please share where you can. Everyone has a part to play in getting these education and information pieces out there, so pass it along. Thanks again.